So many of you guys wondered how would subunits work in Love Live Superstar, as well as what would we do with Shioriko since subunits have already been established. Subunits have been a tradition for Love Live for every iteration. The first subunits was BB, Lillywhite, and Pronton. Aqua's and Nijigaku also got subunits, so it makes sense that Love Live Superstar would get them as well. Subunits are a great way to add more song styles to a group. It diversifies the group and brings in many more fans. So what can they do with these girls? First, it's obviously a bit too early to have them to actually get subunits right now, and we honestly don't know that much about these girls. In fact, we don't even know what they sound like yet, as we don't know who the seiyus are. But out of curiosity, what do I think it will be, and how long should we wait before we might be able to see some news? When can we get their first song, etc. So let's take a look back in history so we at least can get an idea of how long it might take. First of all, every subunit has been created through polls by the fans. Both the name and the composition were created by the community. Here is a table that I've created, which will go through School Idol Project SIP, which is for Muse, as well as Love Live Sunshine, and NijiGaku. All three of these have separate categories to iterate when something happens. So we have first the announcement of the actual project, then we got when the first song came out for this whole project itself. So this often happens way before the anime and before subunits. But you know, it's another way to look at it depending on how we can guess, because sometimes the first song comes out much later, and for example Nijigaku, that was a big gap, but that's because they had a really big album. They had to come with 10 songs rather than just 2, so that's just another thing to consider. After that, we have the start of the subunits. So this is where they make the formal announcement of, hey, we're gonna create subunits and we want your help. So that generally starts with the first poll, and then eventually after a few polls, generally 2 polls, we will have the final set in stone subunits with names as well as who is in each group. And then lastly, we will have the first release for each subunit, which will of course vary depending on it. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it takes shorter, but these are all of the major milestones for getting subunits started, so we can kind of draw some ideas here. So if I were to make some guesses here, Superstar, first of all, it was announced on May 17th of 2020. So obviously it hasn't been that long since they have announced it. So, you know, it might take a little while before we get it. Now the first question is, when is the first song going to happen? Because that generally happens before subunits. Now this has to be a straight up guess, and the fact that, you know, we don't even know who the seiyus are is a big concern for us. Perhaps they could just drop it and then all you hear is a song as well. But I don't know if they would necessarily go down that direction, because I don't think that's ever happened. And generally they're going to give us some time to learn about the seiyus before we get their songs. So for example, if you look at School Idol Project, we had on June 30th of 2010, it was the announcement of School Idol Project, but all intents and purposes, we could say that was in August, and then we waited about 25 days for the full actual release of the song Boku no Life Kyun to Life. But that was just the first project, so we don't want to draw too much from it. I think the best example to draw from is Sunshine, because that is closer to where we are now. Things were a little bit different back then, and I don't think Nijigaku is a great example for me either, because they're a side project and they are doing a lot more songs. So it's not the best one to look at. So let's look at Sunshine. April 2015 was the announcement, and then we got our first song in October. So we're talking about, was that 6-month gap here for October? So perhaps it's going to take about 6 months between the announcement and the first song. So doing some math, it might say December of 2020 is probably like the earliest scenario we might get for the first song for Superstar, and then maybe I would say January as well is very applicable using that time frame. But of course, all of these are just guesses, and I have no clue how quarantine is affecting these deadlines, or I guess approximated guess for these dates. So this could very much be much worse depending on how they are able to handle this. As far as I can tell, they seem to be not that much affected by it, as they continue to pump out songs, but I don't know. It could be in, but by now they probably have it figured out, so things should probably be not insanely affected by now. The next thing is to wonder, when will subunits start? So if we look back to Aqua, because that is a good example, we have from October to December between the first song and the start of the subunits, which that's going to be about a 2-month gap here. So potentially we might get another 2-month gap between the first song and the start of subunits. So maybe January, but you know, worst case scenario, we might have to wait all the way until March if they are actually going for subunits. Now this is only if they're following that trend. This is kind of similar to the trend for Nijigaku as well, so I'm guessing 2 months is probably a good guesstimate for how long it will take. And then after that, we will have to think about how they're going to go through the process of grading. It's probably very similar like the previous ones where we do polls, where they first ask who's going to be in what subunit, and then we want some name ideas, minimize them down, and then pick their favorite, and then let everyone pick their favorites out of their favorites, and that will be the final names. Now my biggest issue here, which I'll get into more detail, is are there more members joining? If this is just the initial 5 but there's going to be more coming, who knows, then maybe they'll just hold us off for a really long time, or maybe they won't, but I'll get into that later. And then if we're going to guess for the finalization of these subunits, it's probably going to be from May to July. That's about how long it takes. It generally takes a few months, maybe up to 4 months to get between the announcement of the subunit to the finalization, because generally they like to give a month or so per poll, and they generally do, okay, first let's have everyone decide on what it's going to be the formations of the subunits. They give, everybody gets their choices and then explain them. Then they pick their favorites, and they give you like choices A through G or something, and you pick your favorite combinations, and then that'll be the winning combination. Then you'll do name suggestions. They'll take their favorite name suggestions, and then they'll have a final poll, and you'll pick the final names, and then they put them all together. So each one's about 4 polls, each one about a month. So 4 months seems pretty reasonable for how long that should take. As long as they're going to keep going that path, which they've done it every single time. So I think that's a pretty safe bet here. So May to July of 2021 is most likely how long it's going to take. And then the first single for them, maybe June to August of 2021. So we're potentially about up to a year away before we get the first songs, assuming if this is following normal trends. Again, this is really early on, and we don't know how they're going to go through this project. It can be very different. Who knows? Maybe they will make no subunits. But if they're following the trend, this is what I can expect to have. So now, the issue I'm going to have, which the fact that are they going to potentially have subunits or not, is going to be pretty linked to the idea who I'm also going to talk about right now is Shioriko. So first, let's talk about Shioriko. As we know, she is the quote-unquote 10th member of the group, or if the 11th they want to count you, but she actually doesn't sing, not yet at least. So I guess 10th is probably a better way to put it, even though you're kind of in it. But as we mentioned before, there are 3 subunits for each different franchise. And in case of NijiGaku, we have DiverDiva the duo, Azuna the trio, and Quartz the quartet. So far, each group has 1 single, which was released about half a year ago. The formula was a deviation from the 333 formula, which we had for School Out Project and Love Live Sunshine. And honestly, I think that is a nice way to change things up, because you know, you don't necessarily always want to have the same thing again and again and again, which could be a fair complaint by a lot of people. So how does Shioriko fit in this situation here? As she could join one of the established subunits, which is what the easy solution that a lot of people spew out on comments. But I just don't really think that's going to work very well. Just because she could join doesn't mean she should necessarily join the group, especially retroactively. The groups were made with the current members in mind. They have their own styles, and honestly, I just don't see her matching the current subunit styles as of right now. Although, not every song necessarily matches the quote-unquote style that we imagine that the subunit have, like Pronto and Love Marshall doesn't seem to match the style so much with the kind of that cutesy image, but most songs tend to follow the trend. But not, even the first single necessarily doesn't do that as well, so who knows, maybe I think that's going to be very different, and potentially I could see that happening. But one thing that's going to be very problematic, for example, Quartz has a 4 in its name, and that's not going to work well when you add a 5th person in there. So I'll say I just don't think that can work at all. Azuna, I'm not really sure what this group is supposed to be honest. I thought it was supposed to be more like an Azalea kind of style, but I guess they're kind of going more like a cutesy style with the first single. I don't know. But as far as I can see, I don't really know what this is. I'm gonna have to look at the second single to really understand what this is. And DiverDiva, well, I think Shioriko is too proper and traditional to really make sense to be a diva, so I don't think she really fits with that. So obviously I'm getting to a situation where I don't know, maybe Asuna. So when people say which subunit she should fit in, people are like, oh yeah, DiverDiva because there's 2 members. Well, that's not a good reason to throw her in. So should we just have a 1, 2, 3, 4 combination? Well, one member isn't really a subunit, so I guess that doesn't really work. You guess you could put it on Asuna, but I actually don't know. That doesn't seem to really match any of the current styles here. So that's kind of the issue that I get with, is that these subunits are created with a certain style in mind. Although I guess that doesn't really seem to match Asuna, so what do I know? But beyond that, I really have 2 ideas that I think that could potentially work, but there are always some complications with that. First, since we don't even technically know if there's going to be 10 members in NijiGaku in the end. Could be 11 or 12, which could really mess us up and this whole process, and maybe we're just gonna wait it out. If you look at the menu for Love Live All-Stars, there appears to be a lot of space for more members here. They have a whole second page, but just to have 1 girl and just seems rather odd to me. So there could be 2 or there could be 3. So she could potentially group up with more members, but the issue is 1, will there just be more members beyond just her? 2, are they going to trickle the members in? And 3, will those potential members have chemistry with Shioriko? So it's kind of interesting because potentially it might not make sense just to have all the new members just join with her. It's possible they'll just wait for a few members and just make a whole subunit out of those new members. I just don't know if it's wise to update the subunits right now, as there could be more members joining later. Having multiple updates could be messy to keep rearranging the subunits here. It would be easier just for them to be added to the current subunits, but the subunits will then just be too large and new members will likely not fit in the group. So perhaps the 4 subunit might make the most sense and not being too messy. And that's why I come to my other choice, which I think is cooler, but I don't know if it's practical. My other idea is perhaps more far-stretched. So it's possible that Shioriko might just not get into a subunit at all, but what I'm thinking is that just for now she could just have special duos and trios, as like we had the vacation albums for Aqua with the winter and summer ones. But later they could establish what I want to call alternate subunits. Basically we could remake the subunits again and they'll release more songs concurrently with the first subunits. So we're gonna kind of have 2 sets of subunits. Potentially that might work, who knows. So for example, we could have like a Setsuna Shioriko subunit, another duo. So yes, this is kind of a little confusing, and I don't know if it's actually practical. And perhaps we're going to get even more girls right now. So I think it's kind of more wise to wait until we know for sure no one else is joining, and maybe we have to wait for the anime before that is going to be done. But more or less, my idea is essentially just having a more permanent established special duos and trios. Like we have the Soldier Game kind of trio for Muse, so potentially we could do something like that as well. That could just happen more than once, so it's not just a one-time deal. So they could potentially go down that route. Now, whether that's going to make sense, and I don't know if alternate subunit is going to be the right name for that, because how is that going to work in tangent with the original ones? Are they going to just kind of forget the original ones? Maybe, and I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but I think that is probably the best thing they could do, is just have potentially just have a 4th subunit. Might make the most sense practical wise, because it's going to be hard to balance the original ones and keep respect to that, but also deal with new girls coming in and make sure that they get fairly treated. Maybe they could just give them more solos to offset that, but it would be kind of weird if they're just a solo person and they don't get involved with the subunits, which makes it feel like they're kind of left out. So it's kind of a trick to balance the fairness of everything here. So honestly, if I were to say they had to do something, is I think they're going to wait for a while, and then once we know all the girls are going to potentially join, then they could reevaluate the situation here. And the easiest is probably just having a 4th subunit. That's probably easiest. Or they could just do a bunch of special duos and trios to kind of offset it. Or they could try remaking the whole subunits again, which would kind of feel weird if they do that because they might disregard the originals. Or maybe they're just gonna have a balance of them. We'll have to see how that goes because we're kind of in uncharted territory here. So now let's move on to Love Live Superstar. Honestly, I feel like the situation is very similar to what I said. We currently know 5 girls, but we don't know if more members will join. But it certainly feels like they set up the group to have that so that it will grow in the future. As we know, all these girls are first years. I honestly think they would wait until all members have been announced before they start doing subunits. Perhaps they won't though. Maybe they want to trickle in the anime, or maybe they're gonna just throw in one girl here and one girl there later. There could be transfer girls who come in later as first years and we get in early on. Or maybe as they move up to second years, the new first years will come and they're like, hey, I want to join your group. So there are a lot of possibilities and room for the group to grow. So I don't know if it necessarily makes sense to decide subunits right now, because if they do that, that kind of puts them in shackles like they have with NijiGaku. And because NijiGaku necessarily wasn't even going to get anime first, so they weren't expecting to see this much. So I can understand why they kind of set up and like, oh, now people like this a lot. We want to expand this, so they kind of get themselves in a sticky situation almost. But let's say if this were just going to only be 5 girls, obviously the subunits is going to be 2 and 3 because you can't have a single because that's not a subunit. So that's the only way to work it with 5 girls. So who would potentially make a decent subunit? I don't know, like Chisato and Kanon. I guess they're best friends, but I literally don't even know what they sound like, so it's impossible to make a reasonable guess at who will be grouped up with who, because we don't really know the styles. The best we can do is personality-wise, but that's not necessarily always the best way to make a subunit. So in the end, what do I think will happen? Honestly, really don't know. We're in uncharted territory. We don't even know if all the girls are finalized, which is my biggest issue here. Is I don't know if this is just every single girl, so I can't even think of future possible combinations here. So yeah, I mean, I know I don't want to leave you with a I'm not sure kind of answer because it feels lame, but that's kind of the situation we are in. I would love to see more girls join, and I don't want them to be limited to just what they have right now. I want to see them grow and have more potential for a lot of cool new ideas, girls with different styles, and just having Shioriko recently join was a really cool thing. And I don't think that necessarily has to be a one-time deal. They could have a lot of new excitement being generated by having new girls join time and time again. So, in the end, I think it's fine for them to wait. We don't have to necessarily have them necessarily fixed right now. Once we have all the girls and we know that's all the girls here, then we could start reevaluating the situation and taking a look at what makes the most sense. But that's just currently my opinions, and I'm just trying to make sure and balance a lot of things here. Trying to make sure it's fair for all the girls and make sure that we respect what we created before, but we'll also leave potential for some changes and growth in the future. And also not to make it too messy in the end. But those are just all the ideas that I came with, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. There is a lot of potential that we can have here. Maybe some people think, oh yeah, let's just shove in a bunch of girls. Maybe for NijiGaku we'll just have 12 girls in the end. That means we can have some units of 4, 4, and 4. So then, so now we'll have one more, and DiverDiva will add 2 more girls, which I guess could work, and it would even up all the subunit sizes. I recognize that, but I think Quartz is pretty untouchable with the name they specified, so they don't want to change that. But the other ones technically aren't, so whatever that means. And I guess in real life, actual bands change and all that, but I don't know how some units do that. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. If you think you have a better solution than what I have, let me know in comments below what you think is going to happen. And I guess if you want to speculate, who do you think it's going to be matched with Shioriko? Just new girls, or if they had to match Shioriko with current girls in NijiGaku, who do you think it is? And I guess for fun, Superstar. What subunits, if they, let's just say they have 5 girls right now, who's going to be matched with who? So you just had to do it in a trio. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. I hope Hopefully you enjoyed this long spiel of a lot of ideas trying to be put together here. But hopefully this was fun, and you know, we can do more of this and speculation in the future and see how you guys will think about what they do in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to catch you guys in another video soon.